Welcome to AskALLi, the self-publishing advice podcast from the Alliance of Independent Authors. I'm Howard Lovey, and this week it's our monthly advanced publishing salon with news and views, tips and techniques for experienced indie authors. Our advanced salon is brought to you by specialist sponsor Ingram Spark. And now, here are your hosts for the advanced salon, Ally advisor Joanna Penn and director Orna Ross.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Alliance of Independent Authors Advanced Self-Publishing Salon with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi Orna.
Hi Joe. Hi everyone.
Hello, and this is our very special December 2019 edition coming up to Christmas. And if you're watching the video, I have my sparkly Christmas eyeshadow on, so I'm in the mood. Orna's not.
I'm not in the mood. It's only the 1st or the 2nd or something. I'll be in the mood on the 21st.
No, fair enough. But today we have a really interesting show. We're going to do a little roundup of 2019, but also a look back at a decade of self-publishing, because the birth, let's call it, of modern self-publishing in the digital age really sort of started around 2009. So we're going to be talking about that. So it should be a really interesting show today. But first up, as ever, we are writers first. We want to talk about what we're doing and also the Alliance. So Orna, what is the latest for the Alliance and also for your own writing?
Yeah, well, if anybody's been sort of on the membership site in the last couple of days or so, you will have seen changes. So we're going through a rebrand and an upgrade of the website, and stuff that we've been kind of working on for a very long time is coming to a head, and hopefully will all be done and completed by the end of this year. So we're in the middle of a really busy period, but lots of new advice downloads. The team is kind of consolidating. We're doing a new organizational membership and a new ambassadors program. Debbie, who used to be with us and had found, she was blog editor, as a lot of you will know, and had left to work on her own books, because she was, the blog is a kind of daily commitment and it was a bit relentless, but actually we found a little place for her to come back to. So she is going to be working with the Ally ambassadors next year to really take things global and to really begin to learn from the different territories that we're involved in, but we don't feel like we're getting enough benefit from this kind of big global membership that we have, and getting much more pointed around that, and also working with the creative industries in 6 key publishing territories. So yeah, lots going on as ever at Ally. And for me myself, finishing the year with a book of Christmas poetry, which is the first of a series of gift books that I'm doing. So a nice hardback version as well as the paperback and ebooks. And I've been working on sort of my look back over the last 10 years of creative self-publishing is how I'm thinking of it. And really everything I've learned from working myself as a self-publisher and from the number of indie authors that I've kind of observed and seen, and the sort of picking out from all the confusions and all the things that go on all the time, the core stuff, the stuff that doesn't change, the stuff that I think is the most important and that applies to every indie. So it's taken me quite a while to put this book together, but first draft's finished, in the deepening phase now, which is my favourite phase to be in. So that's me.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we got to ask you about that hardback edition. Are you doing that through Ingram Spark?
Yes, of course. The wonderful Ingram Spark, sponsor of this very show.
Yes, so we do want to thank Ingram Spark for the support of the show. We both use Ingram Spark, and many indie authors do, to do a lot of print editions, including hardbacks, which, we can do print on demand hardbacks. I do every book now in hardback as well. I love it. I'm doing my backlist. There's just no reason not to. They look good on the vanity shelf. I have one here. So thank you, Ingram Spark. It's your content. Do more with it. Thank thank you to them. So just in terms of what I'm up to, so in terms of publishing, my productivity for authors is out. And this is the second time I have managed to get all the editions ready for launch, 10th of December 2019. So I've got ebooks on all the stores, obviously wide ebooks. The audiobooks are also wide on all the stores, paperback, large print, hardback, workbook editions, all on the same day. So I'm pretty proud of that. And it's, as I said, it's only the second time I've managed to get everything together. Now, of course, it doesn't all come together live on the same day. And many people say, how can you launch a book, with all the editions on the same day? The point is you have to get them all loaded up and then you just announce it on one day once they're all there. And like audio, you can't control when audio arrives. You just have to load it and wait and see if it gets there. So as it was, my audio got there faster than expected. So I just wanted to mention that. So it is possible to launch all editions at the same time. You just have to have a bit of patience and put everything up, as it happens. So I'm doing that. I did NaNoWriMo officially, but I only managed, I did around 15,000 words on my third Matt Walker trilogy. And I just wasn't, because my writing process is very much deep research. Like I love the research process. So I can't necessarily just write a lot of words. I wrote some words and then I needed to go back to research. So I moved on to another book. So I started my Audio for Authors book, which I had started back in August. So aiming to get that first draft done. So, and that's another tip for people, if you're not feeling it with one book, one of the good things about writing multiple genres is just start on something else. And, I've been zooming along on that. So I've got about 40,000 words on that now. So that will be out in February 2020. And that's about audiobooks, podcasting and voice technologies. So yeah, and that's the book I've been trying to write all year, and I feel like now it's just pouring out of me because I have done all the research. So now it's a case of, really putting it together. And it's so funny because we've had this talk about writing evergreen content. I've just been trying and I can't make this book evergreen because these voice tech things change so fast. So I anticipate it a kind of every 3 years new edition type of thing.
I think that's the nature of the world we're in. I also think this is a very important book for the community. We don't really have a full guide like this at the moment. I'm not aware of one. I think this will fill a gap.
There's books on audiobooks, there's books on podcasting, but there's nothing on everything. And I've got a whole thing about audio ecosystems and audio first mindset and things that, you're right, haven't really been done yet. So once again, I feel like it's an important thing, but who knows? But the other thing, and you've heard it, I've put it on my podcast as well, Descript, who I've been working with for a voice double, gave me my first iteration, and which is my AI voice, essentially. Tell me what you thought about it.
I heard it. It's incredible. I was blown away. Absolutely. I was slightly moved, actually, which was a really kind of funny experience. And I'm not even quite sure why that is. But it definitely sounds like you. Without a doubt, it sounds like you. It's not 100% natural, but it was far more natural than I expected it to be from what you had described as coming and, how they're describing it. And I know the tech is moving really, really fast. So it seems to me that it's almost ready. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think if not by the end of 2020, it will be 2021 when we're going to have, already in the last week, Alexa now has emotion. They've, you can now have, and they've opened it up to the developers, which is the key point. So I think, yes, we're going to have emotional voices. The main question, the next question will be, do we want AIs to sound exactly like humans? Which is a whole ethical piece that we'll probably come back to another time. But it is certainly, I didn't expect to have a workable voice double by the end of the year. And it's certainly workable, although I won't be doing audiobooks with it yet.
It's amazing. And just in case people don't quite get what it means is that we can actually have our own voices reading our own books without us having to go through the excruciating pain of reading them ourselves. And so, we are seeing in the marketplace that there are two kinds of readers. those who love to hear the author read their own stuff, and those who do. It really can make super fans out of people. That sort of voice connection is very intimate, and they really, really love it. There are those who prefer a more sort of polished, actorly kind of delivery, and that's fine too. But it's really exciting, and it's going to cut, as well as cutting out a lot of time and effort on the author's part. Obviously, it will also be a lot cheaper to produce audiobooks. So audiobooks they're already booming. They're going to boom even more in the indie space. Yeah.
Yeah, not just in the indie space, in the international space.
Sure.
So we're going to, and you'll be able to license voices. So yes, you'll be able to license my voice to read your audiobook, I think, from 2021. That's my pick. But we're going to come back to our future show in January. So for now, we are going to get into our topic for today. We're going to start with a look back at 2019, because Orna, at the beginning of every month, you post an article on the Alliance of Independent Authors blog at selfpublishingadvice.org, and today you did post a roundup of 2019. So give us a quick overview of what you think were the kind of key points from 2019.
I think the most interesting thing about 2019 is that it wasn't all that interesting. The last 2 years, the last 3 years, I think, we haven't seen a huge game changer. What we have seen is lots and lots of small incremental changes that we know over time build up to be important things. And we're seeing a consolidation in the marketplace, and we're seeing a growth in author confidence. I think that's the two things that we've been seeing for quite a while. So some of the platforms had very good years where they brought really interesting and useful things to the indie community. I think Publish Drive had a standout year. They brought in lots of different innovations, a new ebook conversion tool, a collaboration tool, a book categorization tool using AI, and a new pricing option, which was great. Findaway Voices in the audio world also had a great year. And now I think audio has kind of settled much more. There was not that long ago, indies thinking about audio only thought about Amazon ACX. I think now people are approaching audio very much in the way, and this AskALLi recommends this, I know you do too, very much approaching with the same kind of mindset, which is non-exclusive and reaching as many people and as readers as possible. And with print, you do that by combining Ingram Spark and Amazon KDP Print. And in the audio sphere, you're doing it really with combining somebody like Findaway and ACX. So there are lots of things happening in the wider print world. From a UK perspective, we have watched our biggest chain, physical bookstores chain, Waterstones, transform itself in the last few years, down to the CEO who was brought in a few years ago to do that job and has succeeded in doing it, James Daunt, and he has now taken on Barnes & Noble, not instead of Waterstones, as well as Waterstones. So he's obviously a man with an appetite for work. So a big job. Physical stores, obviously, trade publishers got a lot of thinking and thought around that. And some indies who have a print store model, but as we know, they're very much in the minority. We were thinking more about Nuke and what might happen there. And it looks like it's going to be held anyway for a while, because there was talk about it being axed. So it's still there, and he intends to improve that, and BNN.com as well. So yeah, lots of BookBub brought in Chirp, the first advertising platform aimed at audiobooks. So, they're aiming to do for audiobooks what BookBub has done for ebooks. It's only in the US at the moment, but presumably will be coming to the rest of the world as well, and is already kind of taking off. Google is indexing podcasts now, and it will be easier for authors to use podcasts to advertise their audiobooks. So all in all, audio is getting easier and easier, I think that, and we will continue to see that development. And the other big thing I think that happened with advertising was Amazon has extended now Amazon advertising into the UK and into Germany and the rest of the stores. It's just a matter of time. So yeah, nothing that I could find that was kind of really major game changer. Though sometimes the game changers emerge when you look back, but it seemed to be a
Yeah.
year of incrementals, is how I would kind of think of it.
That's true. I do want to add that I think this year, like about libraries, I think in the past we've had a few tentative approaches to libraries. You know, we thought when Overdrive went to Rakuten, which owns Kobo, we thought, oh, yay, libraries going to take off. And then, we've had even Joe Comrath, like years ago, came up with a library thing. We've had Self-E thing, but nothing has done much for libraries. But what I've personally seen, and I know a lot of other people have seen, is with Findaway, the distribution of audiobooks to libraries and the paper checkout model, which you can get through Drafter Digital and Findaway, means that you can say your marketing can be, hello readers, you can get my ebooks and audiobooks for free if you go to your library and ask them to request my back catalogue. And I'm seeing growth in library checkouts and sales because it's free for the reader to go and get it from the library, and it's much cheaper, especially because we've also seen one of the big publishers particularly deciding not to put books into libraries within the first couple of months because they want to maximize sales rather than borrows. So I think, you know, for the library market, which I know is not like massively significant, but it's been so small for indies that this maybe has been a pivotal year for library borrows.
I think that is right. And I think Kobo Rakuten being in that space has made a difference, and that they, you know, that again, like most of these things, it's slow build. Libraries don't make your fortune, but they are fantastic discoverability outlets, and real readers are there and borrowing, and there is research that proves conclusively that library borrows lead to sales for indies as well as in trade publishing, which has long been the case. And yes, there is that standoff between a number of publishers actually, and in the US libraries, and also some academic publishers and libraries as well. There's a kind of a copyright row going on, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense, I have to say, and which does represent a real opportunity for indies. And we love libraries, don't we? I mean, as
Totally.
authors, you know, I think we all have a love affair and find libraries to be highly romantic places. So it's great, yeah.
We do. So big tip, everyone. First of all, go and request your favourite indie books into your library, local libraries, but also tell your readers to request their favourite books in libraries. So I think the more we can get the word out, the more that's going to help. Okay, so that is a great roundup of 2019. But what we're going to do now is step back in time and do a decade of indie, which I really got quite excited about doing, and spent some time preparing this today because I was like, oh my goodness, this is so exciting, because I have, you know, both of us have been around, you know, this long. I know.
The grand old dames of India.
I know, God, people call me like grandmother. I'm not a grandmother, you know, whatever. It's fine being a grandmother, but I'm not a grandmother of indie by any means. But basically, I'm going to start off because we're not going to go through excruciating detail of a decade. What we're going to talk about are some of the highlights, but also some of the main inflection points in the indie author movement and the indie author business models. Because what I feel is that, you know, things have really taken off, particularly in the English-speaking markets at this point, but people don't necessarily realize that the business models have changed over the years. And if you take a year like 2019, where it seems like not much has changed, not much does change in a year, but a lot changes over a decade. And we can see that in our own lives as well as in indie. So I'm going to start by just popping back to 2009. Joe Comrath, if people were around back then, or we're going to put links in the show notes. J.A. Comrath was one of the first traditionally published authors to really make a big name in the early indie space. And on one of his blogs, he said, 2009 will go down in publishing history as year zero for the upcoming ebook revolution. So what do you think about that quote, Orna?
Well, I think Joe is American, and I think it was year zero for the US, absolutely. Kindle, I think about 18 months before, 2008 was when Kindle came along, and it was 2009 when US authors began to really see the opportunities. And a lot of the opportunities, in indie to this day, as we see with Chirp, break first in the US and then get rolled out into the rest of the world. And I think that was the year when it became viable to make a living as an indie author, and the early adopters saw that, and it definitely was driven by Amazon. And also the iPhone came along at that time, and people were generally, just availing of this opportunity, and authors began to talk to each other. And you had this thing that emerged for the first time where trade published authors were kind of doom and gloom, and those who had started to self-publish, there was quite a bit of, oh, I never would, oh dear no, from a lot of authors. But the ones who were doing it were quite obviously having a great time, and those early adopters, they definitely got the benefit of that.
Yeah, definitely. And although I self-published my first book in like 2008, 2009 was when I put my first book on the Kindle. I also started my podcast in 2009, which is kind of crazy. I bought my first iPhone in 2009 and was using it. Before that, I had one of those Nokias. So it was my first smartphone, and I joined Twitter in 2009. I met you on Twitter. It must have been 2010, 2011. And realistically, it was the beginning of the transition to the consumption of digital media, which we can also put down to podcasting, audiobooks. Before then, it really was we were kind of at MP3 stage with audio, but it was downloadable stuff. Ebooks had been around, but they were downloadable PDFs from websites. So there wasn't like a reader particularly. And the Sony reader was around, but then, the Kindle really made it mainstream. So 2009, a decade ago, US first, it really became viable for independent authors to make a living with their writing. So that was the beginning. Then we're just going to skip ahead quite quickly. So 2010, Apple iBooks launched. So after Amazon being a pioneering company, iBooks launched. 2011 was when we really saw a tipping point with US Kindle millionaires. So the first Kindle millionaire, Amanda Hocking, it was an era of low-priced ebooks. So put up books at 99 cents. You didn't even need much of a good cover. Like the covers were really crap back then. And you could make $1 million. So we had Amanda Hocking, we had John Locke, and we had a couple of other people at the time. It was, before the era. Oh, sorry.
And we had me. Not a millionaire by any means. The opposite end of the spectrum. Completely.
I wasn't a millionaire. I'm still not a millionaire.
But no, I think it's 2011 was, so it had been there and I had been hearing about it. And I was having, I wasn't happy with where I found myself as an author. And so I kind of jumped in. No, I didn't. I dipped my toe very tentatively in this thing called self-publishing. What is it? I don't really get it. I'll give it a go. I just thought I'd say that was when I started.
So 2011, but you'd been watching the space, hadn't you?
I can't say that I had been watching it all that carefully, to be perfectly honest. I knew it was there. I had author friends who were doing it. They were all very techie types. I'm not a techie type. I thought, I thought that's kind of interesting. I was wondering a lot about the rights stuff. That was the bit that always intrigued me. Oh, you get to keep your rights. That's interesting. But it wasn't until I did it that I became interested. So I really did do it very, very much in the spirit of an experiment. And I did a tiny little book, a tiny poetry book. And, it's interesting about that early adoption thing because I put that tiny poetry book up and it sold. And that to me was hugely surprising. And, I was saying to you earlier on, I think it sold about 50 odd copies within a few weeks, which for poetry and me, I just thought that was astonishing, to be perfectly honest, because I know I had worked as a literary agent and I know that loads of poetry books don't sell 50 books in their entire life. So, and again, it's down to what you said, a decent cover at that time was all you needed. No matter what the content was, it was, all you had to do was put it up there. And when I put my novels up, they were all, they all just very easily rose up in the ranks. You put a book free, you got to the top of the free store, you switched over, And you gained
and you kept your ranking.
You kept your ranking, and that was marvelous, wasn't it? Do you remember those golden days?
Oh, I remember those golden days.
So,
but this is why we wanted to do this, because these changes have happened so many times, and each change people adapt. What I was going to say there is 2011 was when the authors with a backlist, so Barbara Freethy and Bella Andre, who come out of romance publishing, had a backlist, I think, of 30, 50 books. And they were the authors who early on went, whoa, we're going to put our backlist up. And they were, they were the big name indies in those days. Hugh Howey came in around then. And also we saw a big discussion in the media even of self-publishing versus traditional publishing, especially because Amanda Hocking took a traditional deal and then disappeared off the radar. But what do you remember, I guess, of that dominant time, I feel, where everyone was like, ooh, self-publishing, ooh, traditional publishing, like bit of a fight?
Yeah, there was, and and there still is to some degree, and I really think it's time we forgot about all that. It's not a useful way of thinking about things for indies. We really need to think about this bundle of rights that we own and the multiple platforms and the multiple formats that we can put our books out in, and the fact it still remains, that is the big fundamental thing that kind of intrigued me at the beginning, that fact that you keep your rights, you don't sell them. You can license them selectively for short terms as an indie, but you don't hand over the whole lock, stock and barrel. So there was then, and there still is in some quarters. It's definitely has lessened, but it hasn't disappeared completely. A sort of prejudice against self-publishing as an option. There are all sorts of very specific historical reasons for that around vanity publishing and other things, which aren't really that important. But the media, I think it's worth saying, do not get your information about self-publishing from trade media press, because still to this day, it's reported in very inaccurate ways. And that was true then. A false war was set up between authors and between publishers, indie publishers, trade publishers, indie authors, which isn't useful, isn't real, and yeah, I'd like to see the back of. I hope that with this turn of the decade, let's see that one out. And I think the next biggest change, everybody would agree, was the launch of Kindle Unlimited. So in 2014, this was the next pivotal kind of big important move and big important shift. So we saw Kindle Unlimited, which was Amazon KDP Select, changed really the way in which authors could publish and could market their books. And it was a subscription model. It was a good idea. You could see where it was coming from. The payment method was different it was done on pages read. But one of the issues was that the scammers came into the store in a big way. That was one problem.
Yeah, well, I think, and one of why we wanted to bring this up is that so many authors now came in after this shift. And there is a big mindset difference between those of us who have been around longer. Because for me, like, people question why we would be wide, whereas a lot of we all started out as wide. Like Smashwords has been around wide since like 2007, I think. Mark Coker's always been wide and has always counselled against being exclusive with Amazon. What we saw in 2014 was suddenly there was a reason to be exclusive to Amazon, and of course because most the biggest market is the US still, and the US, mainly indies were based in the USA, and they were like, oh wow, this is great, so they all piled in. But then what we have seen since 2014 is incremental changes in various algorithms, and suddenly that became the dominant conversation amongst the sort of growth in indie blogs and Facebook groups and various other things. So we wanted to point this out. Like, one, this was a significant shift. Before that we had, in the years before, we'd had Kobo writing Life Draft Digital, ACX, we mentioned that, Ingram Spark. We had all these new companies that enabled people to go wide. And yet then in 2014, people were opting to really just go digital, Amazon only. And the ramifications of that change were huge. So I can certainly say from my perspective that my book sales dropped at that point on Amazon, and most people's sales, without advertising, which we'll come back to, have not recovered from that pre-2014 moment, because it used to be that customers could only buy and then suddenly they could be in KU. So for authors, was this great? It's questionable, but all of these things are incremental change. Well, this was not an incremental change. This was like a pivotal shift in the business model of being an indie. So any further thoughts on that?
I think the answer is that for some authors it was good and for some it really wasn't. And then the question is it good for the community as a whole, which is a different thing. Again, we saw the early adopters who went in, who cleaned up. You know, they did. Some people did really, really well at the beginning without having to do a whole lot. But going, you know, KU now today is a very different place and space to the space that was there in 2014.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing that has changed, the conversation shifted from kind of trad pub versus indie, and then it became exclusive versus wide. So that's been the kind of dominant conversation between indie authors since then. And also a lot of misunderstandings about what these things mean. Like exclusive only means your ebooks, your print books can be wide, your audiobooks can be wide. But I think, you know, things have not stopped changing with those algorithms since then. And we're going to talk in the next show about what might happen in the 2020s. But so that was 2014.
Yeah, and there were only a few little things between then, and it was almost 4 years later before we got the next pivotal thing. So, you know, we had Barnes & Noble pulled out of the rest of the world and to focus on their US business. They sold the UK Nook to Sainsbury's, who then sold it on at a supermarket, who then sold it on to Kobo, which was fine. And we had the merge of CreateSpace and KDP Print in 2018. That was a significant thing, but not as significant as Amazon ads.
Yeah, so 2018 was probably the next big shift in the indie author business model. Up until 2018, you really could just load a book onto Amazon and have some kind of organic reach. And of course, the same had been true on Facebook up to probably about a year before that. You'd been able to build a business on Facebook without paying for advertising. So what we had 2017, 2018 was suddenly the pay-to-play model came in, and it was sort of September 2018, 2017, something like that, when the big name authors suddenly reported a massive drop in organic reach and also boughts. And the big discussion was suddenly, oh, right, we have to do something. And certainly I've noticed this. You pretty much now, we are a decade beyond being able to upload a book to Amazon and expect it to sell. And you and I both hear from authors every day who think that publishing involves loading a book up on Amazon. And yes, that's true, but no one's going to buy it because no one can find it in the store. So this was possibly the biggest shift in terms of mindset to the independent author movement, because we had always been, up until then, under the sort of idea that you could just put stuff out there for free and have it sell. So that was a huge moment. I think people are still trying to come to terms with this and what you have to do. So what do you think about this, Orna?
Well, I think one of the things that I believe is that, again, it's a discussion that there are various discussions in the indie author community that are had very publicly, and then they're taken as being true of the entire community, and they're not. And so what happened was that people who were kind of already successful, already selling books, came in on the ads thing and then went and ads worked. And then when ads stopped working so well for them, this becomes kind of the conversation and it is assumed that everybody's experiencing the same thing. And what actually is happening with ads is that in any business, you have to market, and in any business, you have to invest money and time in marketing. And the situation, I think, whereby you could just launch a book and put it out there and it would sell was never going to be something that would last forever. It is down to the early adoption thing. And the thing is that people didn't realize that, I think, and that led to a false conversation. And it's a false conversation that then everybody thinks is actually the conversation. And that's the problem that I see again and again. So there are lots of people for whom Amazon advertising is not their marketing of choice, who are selling books. There are other ways to sell books, and it's a big decision, to decide to do Facebook advertising or Amazon advertising. I saw an ad for a course recently that said advertising works. Well, yes, but it works in certain circumstances for certain authors with certain books, and that's not said often enough. So advertising is just it's just a way of marketing your books, and you have to have some way to market your books. And the attention that we pay, the way in which we have the conversation worries me. I think that's the thing I'd like to say more than anything else.
So I think, when we consider it now, it's almost like if you wind the clock back a decade, you pretty much could do an ebook and upload it to KDP or Smashwords. I mean, because KDP was originally only for Americans, I did my first ebooks with Smashwords. So that was what we did first. And then, and it was you who got me back into print around 2014, I think. I wasn't even going to bother with print. And then, as you say, where we are now, if you look at what's happened, we have had a huge expansion. And yes, it's been incremental, but there's been an expansion of opportunities for what we can do as independent authors. We can do ebooks in every country in the world. We can do print books in pretty much every country in the world. Print on demand. We can do audiobooks all over, like in a lot of different countries, all over, probably everywhere, through Findaway and various places. So, and then we can also do licensing. Many authors are now doing foreign rights licensing. We can reach people through all these different mediums, through the internet. We can make a living with our writing. So all of that has happened, but it's almost like it's happened bit by bit by bit. And yet, whoa, look at it. And now we've got so much choice. That's why it can be confusing.
Absolutely. And though in some ways, somebody who's starting off now, coming in now, sees 3 formats: ebook, print book, and audiobook, and a variety of platforms. And you can choose to, go, of course, exclusive to any player, or you use a distributor to take you wider than that. And so it isn't all that complicated now if you're coming in right now. I think the people who've had it most complex actually are the people who joined in the last 2 or 3 years. So I mean, the most important thing for me as I kind of sit here and observe things is how hugely the confidence in the author community has grown. And I think we cannot underestimate the effect that that's going to have in the next 10 years. And we're not going to talk about the next decade because that's the subject of the next show. But I do think that's the thing that, as I look back over the last 10 years, as I think about myself 10 years ago, where I was on the floor, actually, not knowing where to go next, feeling really stuck, because a lot of indie authors who have come into the space now don't remember the dark ages when you only could published through a trade publisher, and if you had gone through a trade publishing deal and it hadn't turned out the way you wanted it to turn out, you really were in a very difficult place. Or if you couldn't get a publisher, the number of books that we lost in those years because authors just were stopped from going any further. So for me, that publish me please desperation that used to exist then, very understandably, that's still there a bit for some authors who want validation more than they want production or publication. It's still there a little bit, but back then it actually had a grip of our throat, and authors were going into a negotiation with a rights buyer, a trade publisher, in a very weak negotiating position. You basically took whatever they offered, and they didn't offer very much. So all of that's changed so completely, and I love that. That's the thing that, to me, is the biggest and most important thing that has come out in the last 10 years.
And we should say, obviously, in 2012, the Alliance was founded, and we've seen lots of author groups as well since then. It was a sort of proud indie movement, part of the global maker movement, and independent creators, force in every industry. We've seen it in music, we see it in art, we see it everywhere. So I think I agree with you. I think the empowerment is hugely important, putting the power in the creator. And then, of course, just to reiterate that although the fundamental, hasn't changed, there have been these few inflection points that have made a big difference to how we make a living. And of course, this is the advanced salon, so we do talk about money. And I in 2009 I had a day job, and that's when I learned about how you could self-publish. 2011, cheap ebooks, 99-cent Kindle millionaires. I left my job in 2011. 2014, which was when KDP Select and KU came in, and then 2018, Amazon ads. Those are the kind of biggest shifts that I think have impacted our business model of how we make a living. But of course, I all the way have made multiple streams of income, as have you. We have never made our entire income stream from book sales. This is really, really important. So what are the other fundamentals that don't change, Orna? We always talk about multiple streams of income. What else doesn't change?
Well, understanding the value of copyright and understanding the concept of what we're now calling selective licensing, I think that is something that you need to be aware of. You needed to be aware of it 10 years ago, you need to be aware of it now, you will need to be aware of it forever. That's a sort of a core thing. Taking a creative approach, not believing, there's a lot of conversations, a lot of heated conversation in our community. We have a fabulous, supportive community, but we can be a little dramatic at times. And so don't believe everything you hear. And if somebody tells you something about self-publishing, test it. Try it for yourself. Because we're all different. We all have different readerships. We're at different stages in our career. And as we can see, things are constantly changing. So the only way to know whether something works or not for you is for you to give it a go. And do everything in the spirit of, I'm trying this out. If it doesn't work out, no worries, I've learned. And so I take that learning into the next thing. Trying to get it right, trying to second guess the market, trying to do something that somebody else did. I see that not working all the time. And understanding that we are in business, I think that's the other core fundamental. It's not the same to be in business as to have a career. They are two different choices in life. And if you're running a business, up your business skills a little bit. I know a lot of authors have an aversion to business skills as a concept, on the way they're taught a lot is very dry and very boring. I get all that. I am that kind of person myself. But knowing the fundamentals of how business works and what a good business person does. So for example, that marketing is part of publishing. Publishing is a business that isn't just production, it's also about marketing, promotion, selective rights licensing, and running your author business. So understanding that and giving yourself plenty of time to learn and to grow. So not putting a lot of time pressure on yourself, realizing this is, a long-term thing. Owning your rights, you own them forever. For 70 years after you, your family will own them. So there is no mad rush here. It's important to just get it right as you go.
Yes, and of course, what also doesn't change is creating valuable intellectual property assets, which is, I think, how I'm framing it for 2020 in my goals is I create intellectual property assets, which goes beyond I write books. That's how I'm really trying to think about it going forward, which again is it's two parts of the brain. I know, the creative side, the business side, but they have to go together. And that's how we're going to do this for at least another decade. So we, any other thoughts now, or should we look forward?
I think let's talk about the next time, because I think that idea of intellectual property assets from our owned copyright is a great way to finish this look back at the last 10 years.
Yeah. Brilliant. So next show is going to be on the 6th of January, 2020, and we are entering the 2020s, which is kind of crazy. And so in our next show, we are going to think, and Orna and I are both going to really have a think and do some research. You know, I'm obsessed with all of this futurist stuff, and Orna knows a lot more than she gives herself credit for around some of this technology. So we're going to really, in the next show, look at what we think the trends are going to be for authors and creatives going into the 2020s. Obviously, we can't make predictions, but what we can do is look at what some of the things are that we're interested in that we think might impact you guys, and also the things that we are personally doing to position ourselves for continued creative and business success. Anything else, Orna?
And the fact, I think, that the future is here. You know, a lot of the things that we're thinking about as, you know, oh, this is coming, are actually there. They have arrived. And I think it's important to kind of recognize that and to begin to shift the thinking around that a little bit more in the community and get out of the, you know, the things that we talk maybe too much about and start talking about some of these incredible opportunities and potential that's coming and already here.
Yeah, and also just to say, we picked 3 or 4 inflection points from the last decade. So you can expect there to be 3 or 4 inflection points in the author business in the next decade. And again, we can't pick what they are, but we have to expect that change will come, and we will be ready and we'll be here, won't we, Orna? We're always here.
Roaring 20s, here we come.
Woohoo! So I guess all that remains to say is happy holiday season to everybody. Hope you stay sane and get some creative work done amongst all the festivities wherever you are.
Yes, have a great time. Happy writing, I hope, and happy publishing till we see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the AskALLi Advanced Self-Publishing Salon with ALLi Director Orna Ross and Joanna Penn of thecreativepenn.com. I'm Howard Lovey, keeping you up to date with the fast-changing choices and challenges of self-publishing. Our Advanced Self-Publishing Salon is brought to you by specialist sponsor Ingram Spark. The Self-Publishing Advice Podcast is a weekly show from ALLi, the Alliance of Independent Authors. Find more author advice, tips, and tools at our Self-Publishing Advice Center, selfpublishingadvice.org. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at allianceindependentauthors.org. Now, what are you waiting for? Go write and publish.